Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. My name is Leon Jones, and this evening I'm going to talk about the gerrymandering decision that came down by the Supreme Court 6-3, and I'll get into some other social issues along with the Democratic Party. Now, as you know, the Democratic Party is the party of the Klan. And one thing that I can tell you about the Democratic Party, and I just saw one of my representatives named Carson. He is the congressperson because he's out and about. Because today here in Indiana, it's our primary. So the primaries are going to decide who the Democrat and the Republican, who they're going to face off for the midterm elections. Now you have the individuals running for the state house and the state senate, and then, of course, on a national level as well. But let me get down to this 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court, because you have people like Hakeem Jeffries thinking that the Democrats aren't going to stop fighting, which they're not. And I will say this about the Democrats and Republicans: you need to take notice of this. The Democrats will do everything to stay in power. They're not thinking about the people. I know. I watched a clip last night of MS Now, and Stacey Abrams was on that show. Now, of course, Stacey Abrams ran for governor twice in Georgia and lost. And now Keisha, I think her name is Keisha Bottoms. She used to be the mayor of Atlanta. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now, brothers. I'm not voting for any Keishas to be in power. I'm not voting for any Beckys to be in power, any Mayleens, any Marias. In other words, I'm not going to vote for women to be in power because they tend to stray when it comes to the issues. You look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, look at Nancy Mace, you look at Megyn Kelly. You put a number of these women, they will stray. But getting back to these Democrats, the Democrats have a lot of nerve by saying that we're going to give tax cuts to the billionaires. Okay. The last time I saw it, I can name you some billionaires who are part of the Democratic Party. Jay-Z is a billionaire. Oprah's a billionaire. And what about George Soros? He's a billionaire. And Tyler Perry is also reaching that status. And a number of black athletes are millionaires. Number of rappers are millionaires. But they're still talking about being on this racial oppression. And this is why they're having a hard time with this 6-3 decision. Now, again, the Voter Rights Act hasn't disappeared. It's just voting by race. That's, for the most part, disappeared in the South. But the Democrats, it's funny how they talk about gerrymandering when they're the ones who gerrymandered all of their states. The reason why they're having an issue with the Republicans doing it, because the Democrats went very far, particularly in the state of Virginia. And I used to live in the state of Virginia. And at one time, Virginia was a red state when you had Governor Gilmore and Governor George Allen. But now, because of Northern Virginia, Virginia is blue. Now, what Stacey Abrams said last night, she said that they might not win anything on a national level. So I want everybody on a local level, because a lot of us aren't into the local politics or the Democrats. are going to try to snake their way into bringing their progressivism to the local stage. And for you individuals who work for your municipalities, like your cities and your counties, you need to be aware of this because the Democrats will not stop. They're like the Terminator. I know, shout out to Tommy Sotomayor, who used to say BT 1000 when it came to black women. Well, the Democrats will not stop, even when they're out of power. But what the Democrats are doing is they're getting a bunch of dummies involved. The Democrats believe in this Marxism. But let me get on to the black part. All you blacks who are Democrats right now, yes, you had a lot of black districts. Particularly, I saw that diagonal line. It was about 350 to 400 miles long. It's a 45-degree line, a blue line in the red state of Louisiana. Well, what you really did, you really voted based on race. Well, that's not constitutional. Everybody knows that's not constitutional who studied civics. But the Democrats, they continue to do all this race hustling. The problem is they don't have anything to run on. It's either racism on the black side, and on the white liberal side, it's I hate Trump. What these knuckleheads want is redistribution of wealth, but not their wealth. Not their wealth. It's funny how Bernie Sanders used to say, tax cuts for millionaires. Now that he's a millionaire, now he says billionaires. Well, are you going to go to trillionaires? Because the higher you go when it comes to the income amount of money made, the less people are in those brackets. And if you look at your billionaires, look at the influence that George Soros has. He's putting money out every day to Democratic candidates. Look at the influence that Oprah has, the influence that Jay-Z has. The bottom line is, in the black community, you have a lot of boulets who do a lot of talking. And what the boulets are doing, they're actually using the black people. Because see, these boulets don't come into the hood. Because if there was change, regardless of the Voting Rights Act or not, black people had something going on. You had a number of black people who wanted integration. And these boulets, like Stacey Abrams, really want to keep black people on a plantation. Do as I say, not as I do. They want to be your overseers, your gatekeepers. And in the end, if you're not smart enough to understand this, you will end up on the plantation. The bottom line is the black Democrats, particularly a number of your Gen Xers, baby boomers, and silent generation, they still believe all that bullshit about civil rights. But they don't understand that the Civil Rights Act was passed by the Republican Party. The Democrats didn't want civil rights. In fact, if you are a male, a masculine male, and you vote Democrat, you need to explain yourself. Now, at least John Fetterman, he is a Democrat, but he makes sense. You can have a Democrat who's conservative. There's some of them that are still around, but many of them, they've gone off on a deep end. In fact, with all the blacks running, you think about it. You give black people a chance. Now, there was this sheriff in Louisiana, Susan, got her last name, but she has 36 felony counts. There was also a Democrat who was a black woman. She resigned before the hammer came down. But see, these are DEI hires. Because this woman, the Susan character in Louisiana, let a number of individuals escape from jail, and she claims to be the first black woman sheriff. You can be the first black woman sheriff. You could be the first dog who's a sheriff, but if you're not doing your job, regardless of what race you are incompetent. You are not helping. And see, this is what the Democrats have always played on, identity politics. And what the Democrats do, you hear this term black and brown. So they want to bite off of the civil rights that the black people went through. But here's the issue. All the resources that black people were supposed to get are going to other persons of color who had nothing to do with the Civil Rights Act, but they're benefiting off of it. And see, black people, when you see these illegals coming into your neighborhoods, what's happening is these illegals have become the new voting bloc. Democrats believe they already have you on a plantation, so they want to expand their voter base with the illegals. But when it comes to the illegals, you don't hear the Democrats talk about black and brown Latinos, white Latinos. No. And the thing about it is, these Latinos and these Asians and these Indians of color, see, what they've done is they've put every person of color together to be one minority. But the minority that's not receiving any resources is your foundational Black Americans, because you even have your Africans. And the funny thing about this is, and I've been around a number of other ethnic minorities, and I'm going to tell you this. You want to know who's worse with prejudice and racism and white people? And I've worked with a few of them. Nobody's any worse than them saying niggas. I'm talking about Arabs, Indians, the Chingers. They don't like black people worth anything. They actually believe that they're better than black people, more educated than black people. But they get most of the resources. See, they're piggybacking off of what black people started. But in the end, they're benefiting. They're going to continue to benefit off of what black people started. But they hate black people. They still, some of these other so-called people of color, they actually think black people should be on a plantation, serving them as well. So we keep screaming white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy in the South with these maps here. See, what these maps, they represent individuals in every area of a state. Now, for the most part, in a rural district, they're not going to vote for anybody in an urban district because they live in two different areas. And the resources are different. Now, don't get me wrong, there are poor rural folks just like poor city folks, but the needs are different. Now, what these maps are going to do doesn't mean the Republicans are going to take the House. It just means that when the maps are drawn fairly, because Texas now is allowed to proceed with their maps. Now, Virginia, their maps are right now in the state Supreme Court. Now, what's going to happen is, and here's my belief, if the state doesn't shoot that down, believe it, it's going to go to the Supreme Court, because the arguments are also going to say this map is based on race, because they're using Alexandria, Arlington, Falls Church, maybe Manassas, but I know it's Alexandria, Arlington, and Falls Church that used to be part of DC, right along I-66, just coming in through the Georgetown area till you get right into DC, and then you hit US 29, the Whitehurst Freeway, right in that area. That used to be Washington, D.C., but Virginia took their land back. But what you have is you have the cities who have all the Congress people, and they're supposed to represent individuals that live 200-300 miles away. That doesn't make any sense. And the Virginia map has very little Republican representation. In fact, if you look at Maryland, you look at New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts was very big for gerrymandering. In fact, their map, and if you go back to my older videos, they had a map that looked just like a salamander. Diagonal, it had legs on it. That's the Democrats. The Democrats came up with all these maps so they can gain more seats. Now, I'm not saying the Republicans aren't trying to gain seats, but the Republicans are basically following the rules. But you have Hakeem Jeffries out there again blaming the Republicans for starting a war. What war was started? If there's any war, Hakeem Jeffries, you started the war. You and the mainstream media and these other Negroes out here. You're trying to sound like Barack Obama, but you're a fake ass Barack Obama. You're going down to Florida trying to threaten the governor, Ron DeSantis, and you can go down to Florida, and you can even come here to Indiana. Now, I tell you what, Indiana got afraid because they were going to do the same thing. Now, they might turn around and do it. But see, here in Indiana, for the most part, it's already a red state. Now, you have individuals who are running. Now, that if you are in Indiana and you're traveling along 96th Street and I-69, there was a billboard up there, impeach Trump. The lady's name is Tara Nelson. Do not vote for her. Do not vote for Tara Nelson. Now, she's welcome to come here and explain herself on the 401 Talk Show radio show here in Indiana. But when I'm saying impeach Trump, is that all you're running on? She needs to explain to the state of Indiana on why Trump should be impeached. Is it something that she heard before? Because see, when you are House members, you can impeach the president, but you cannot remove the president. Now, what the House can do is the House can bankrupt this country because the House holds the purse strings. Now, you hear me, Republican people? Even though you got to win in Louisiana, and I know a lot of the other states are going to do the same thing. The bottom line is it really isn't a win until you get out the vote. The SAVE Act needs to pass. Need to get rid of mail-in ballots because the Democrats are always going to find a way to cheat because they don't have anything to run on. Nobody wants this progressivism. Nobody wants to hear about transgenderism. You see, when I vote for the economy, I vote for families. The Democrats are against all of that. They're anti-male, anti-straight male. They're anti-family, anti-hetero family. The Democrats really, they're anti-business. because what they really want is redistribution of wealth. I'm talking about the far left. But it's funny how people like Ilhan Omar come in making $170,000 and they're now millionaires. People like Nancy Pelosi did a lot of insider trading. The problem is when it comes to politics, it's a lot of money that goes into politics. That's why people don't want to run. Where was the campaign finance reform? The late John McCain brought that up, and late John McCain was a senator from Arizona. Well, you have too many corporations, and yes, shout out to Machismo TV, shout out to Mr. O, shout out to Professor Nez, shout out to ABL, shout out to Barry Cunningham. They're all bringing this to light. Shout out to my man, Will Johnson. And I will say this to you when it comes to black people again. Black people are race hustlers. I'm talking about your boule black people. You see, the classism exists in the black community as well. In fact, black people want, the upper black people want the lower black people to stay in the hood. And they want to use those black people as experiments when it comes to all of their legislation in urban areas. They want them to stay in the hood because they make money from those black people. These churches make money. Your boules are also your pastors. The pastors don't care anything about God. I mean, you have Warnick. He's supposed to be a pastor. He's wicked. And all religion is today is another moneymaker. Until we get the cancer and switch everything back around, it's not going to go back to the way things used to be. Now, was there racism in the past? Yes. Is there some racism around? Well, there's a lot of areas that has phantom racism. See, looking at the Democrats right now, if you put your thinking cap on, every time I hear a Democrat talk about sundown towns, it's what they want. The Democrats really want the sundown towns. The Democrats really want the Klan. They are the party of the Klan. Everything that you hear the Democrats spew is nothing but hate. You look at the Southern, you look at the Southern Poverty Law Clinic. Stood for helping people. Instead, it encouraged hate. And one thing I want individuals to do, and this is why I don't play a lot of clips on my channel. The problem with playing clips, see, the media will play a clip and they'll play enough of the clip to get you enraged, especially if you're black. And if you don't know how to discern yourself, you're going to be taken. I mean, I hear all the arguments by blacks, against Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams is just a sore loser. She lost twice. But we have too many brothers out here sitting on the sidelines. And like I said, any Keisha running, and shout out, there's another Keisha running for the mayor of Chicago. And Mr. O said it right. Shout out to you again, Mr. O. I'm not voting for any Keishas. The bottom line is, when you put women in a lot of powerful positions, they don't know how to handle power. See, what women want is they want the title. They want to be able to delegate everything, but without the responsibility. It's just like patriarchy, particularly black women. Oh, yeah, they want matriarchy mixed with patriarchy. In other words, they want to benefit from the traditions of patriarchy while being the matriarch at the same time. Now, you have never heard anybody say that. I'm the one who said it. Most black women, particularly the ones on the left, want matriarchy and patriarchy at the same time. In other words, they want to benefit from the traditions of patriarchy while at the same time have the feminism. No man is going to tell them what to do. They want to be the one to control a relationship through matriarchy. Well, matriarchy and patriarchy are total opposites of each other, but on the same coin, they're opposite sides of the same coin. Now we know that matriarchies don't exist. If they did, you would see an all-female army, an all-female police force. And see, a number of women have gotten comfortable after society is being built by saying they don't need men. Well, here's what I'm going to say like this. As a man, I know how to cook and clean. I know how to fix things. I have an education. So I can sit out here and say, what do I need a woman for besides fucking? Because for the most part, most of them are good for being a human toilet, smashing and dashing. And I say that because of the easy sex that they give out. Because a number of them grumble about men, particularly black men, but you're attracting those black men because you want those black men. Because a black man that has himself together, you don't want to deal with that black man. Why? Because he's going to expect something out of you and you want to control the relationship. See, unless particularly black women, to be honest with yourselves, you are never going to have a relationship. You're going to be 40, 50, 60 years old. You're either going to be a baby mama or you're going to be somebody's side piece. Now, I'm not saying all black women, but too many of you black women follow the feminist doctrine. Too many of you vote Democrat. That's another thing. So when it comes to politics, you vote along with the white feminists. But you think going out there getting the bread is going to make it better. Number of you sisters out there, you have all the standards for the black men, but no standards for that white man. I believe her name, she was running for Congress. And you don't hear her name anymore. But her name was Kim. I mean, heard her name about 6 years ago. Found out that she was a white man that had a strip joint, had a bunch of kids out of wedlock. Oh, but that was okay. And he had a bunch of kids out of wedlock from different baby mamas, a white guy. But she picked him over a black person that doesn't have that going for himself. You see, a number of sisters, they want to control a relationship. So that's why they will go with a lower man. And it's kind of funny how they talk about age gap dating. It is predatory for an older man to date a younger woman. Now, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't do that myself. I cannot see myself even with a 40-year-old woman. You know, me, I go maybe mid-50s on up. Because, heck, me and a lot of 40-year-olds don't have a lot in common. Heck, me and a number of 50-year-olds don't have a lot in common, unless you're from the country. So I'm pretty much from the country. But the bottom line is, you get a number of these black women up there They are influenced by the social media, like this movie that's out. It's another version of Color Purple, where two disformed daughters want to go kill their daddy based off of what the mom. And what it is a lot of these black women are going to watch that movie and they think they're going to do that. We have a lot of problems in this country in the black community. There's no structure in the black community. It's because the Democrats are running the blacks. And with blacks, there's finally a delineation. Just because somebody is black, most of these blacks like Roland Martin, Abby Phillips, Joy Reid, they're what we call tethers. But they want to benefit off the black struggle too. And they want to come and say we're all sisters and brothers. You have people like Jamal Bryant. You even have sweet black men trying to tell straight black men the game out here. When a number of you sweet black men, you get everything from your mamas. See, a lot of mamas ain't shit out here. But sons are trained to take up for their mama no matter if their mama's wrong. They're trained to even beat up on their father. And in the black community, there's a lot of simps. Mama's the queen, mama's God, mama can do nothing wrong. Sometimes you got to move away from mama. And I'm talking about the blacks right now. Because a lot of you blacks out there don't understand politics. You don't understand structure. Because many of you have been brought up without structure. You don't understand respect for authority. But you believe somebody owes you something. But many of you are taught not to do anything else but try to throw a football and run with a football, shoot a basketball, pick up a mic, start rapping. And many blacks who go to jail are well respected, whereas you get a black man who starts his own business, he's a lame. The black community is backwards. This is why a number of men don't go to church. There are a number of good black men out there. But the problem is the Pookies and the Ray Rays and a number of you black women have chosen that made it bad for the whole image of black men. See, a number of you black women, and I remember watching these shows in the 90s and the 80s, got on Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael, Montel Williams, Richard Bay, Ricky Lake, Rolanda Watts, Tim Sid Bledsoe, Queen Latifah. Waiting to Exhale was out in the 90s. Color Purple. We were influenced by all those shows, Jenny Jones. And what has happened is, some of you black women hate who you are, and you don't like the black man. The bottom line is, when it comes to black men, we don't hate black women. But we can't be with somebody that doesn't really want to be in a relationship. I mean, if you're influenced by somebody like Kendra G, thinking that she's the prize, well, you're going to be single for the rest of your life. And you're going to be passed around like a hot potato. And you're going to wonder where all the good men are. And plus, a number of you are voting Democrat. See, feminism, all this so-called education, and the jobs that you were given by the white man have allowed you sisters to so-called kill it. But now you're having a hard time. Because you're not getting those resources. Because those resources are going to the illegals. But see, the same party that you vote for, they're not doing a damn thing for you. In fact, they're fucking you. Yeah. And these other minorities, they're the ones who are calling you worse names than that white person. Because they're piggybacking off of the civil rights movement. And then you got these old washed up civil rights leaders. You see, when we talk about voting, and let me get into the share my screen, and let's talk about the gerrymandering, the Voter Rights Act, and gerrymandering. Okay, now I'm gonna read you the Voter Rights Act of 1965. 1965 was a good year. I was born in 65. Well, here's the Voter Rights Act. Every 10 years after the census, states redraw the boundaries of congressional and state legislative districts to reflect population changes. And that's a process known as redistricting. Done well, it's a chance to create maps that elect legislative bodies that, notice what I said, fairly represent communities and that are, in the words of John Adams in 1776, an exact portrait of a miniature of the people as a whole. So redistricting also takes place at the local level to redraw the boundaries of districts used to elect members of bodies such as county commissioners, county councils, and school boards. You didn't know that either. People think it's just the congressional people. But also, redistricting is also a chance for those in control of the process to rig maps to favor certain candidates or political parties, and that's a practice known as partisan gerrymandering. And that's what the Democrats started. After Texas said they were going to do their form of gerrymandering, which the Texas map is fair, here comes California. They had Prop 50. Now, see what Virginia had some language that people couldn't understand. Now, here's my belief on why they did Virginia that way. Because the Democrats have been gerrymandering for a long time. They're basically gerrymandered out in their states. So Virginia, right now, for Democrats, is their last gasp. So what Virginia did was definitely unconstitutional. But now, what Virginia did, now you have the people from the Congressional Black Caucus who don't do anything for black people anyway, saying that the new map that Louisiana has is unconstitutional. Why? Because what the Democrats believe, they believe in racial gerrymander. They're talking about representing individuals, Congress people, but they want their Congress personnel in black districts to be black. Symbolism. That's what they want. Now, I'm just going to say this. Gerrymandering has been a long problem in the United States, and the redistricting cycle after the 2020 census was the first since the Supreme Court's 2019 ruling that gerrymandered maps can't be challenged in federal court. Since then, Americans have seen gerrymandering ramped up to unprecedented levels in many places, and the worst is yet to come. Now, partisan gerrymandering, it is undemocratic. Basically, elections are supposed to produce results that reflect the preferences of voters. But when maps are gerrymandered, politicians and the powerful choose voters instead of voters choosing politicians. The result is skewed. And then you have unrepresentative maps where electoral outcomes are virtually guaranteed, even when the voters' preferences at the polls shift dramatically. Now, in some cases, the party drawing the maps may even be able to win a majority of seats, even though it wins only a minority of the vote. These line drawing abuses are especially frequent when one party has sole control of the process. So, under single party control, map drawing tends to occur with inadequate transparency, with partisan concerns taking priority over the fair representation of the public as a whole. This is what the Democrats are doing. Now, there are multiple ways to gerrymander. Again, there are multiple ways to gerrymander. Now, the easiest way to gerrymander is through the lens of two basic techniques called cracking and packing. And it's funny with the Democrats. You know, the Democrats are talking about the Supreme Court, but yet it's the Democrats who want to make Washington State, Washington, D.C. a state and Puerto Rico a state. Why? Because they'll gain more House seats and they'll gain 4 senators, and they want to pack the Supreme Court from 9 to, I don't know, it could be 13. But the Democrats are hypocrites because what they're doing, they don't want anybody else doing it. Now, do I believe the Republicans should be doing it? No. But gerrymandering based off of race is unconstitutional. I'm going to prove that to you in a moment. So, again, when we get back to this gerrymandering, the easiest way to understand is when you look at gerrymandering, there are techniques of cracking and packing. Now, basically, cracking splits groups of disfavored voters among multiple districts with their electoral strength divided. Now, crap groups, I said crack groups, not crap groups, but crack groups, they struggle to elect their preferred candidates. And this is what's going on when you have the black districts in Louisiana going diagonal because it crosses some of the rural districts. So the rural individuals might have a candidate that they want, but because the district is in their neck of the woods, they're going to have to vote for that urban district, that person in an urban area. And the Democrats, they're utilizing a lot of partisan gerrymandering to win the midterms as well. Now, again, this is why I say crack groups struggle to elect their preferred candidates in any of the districts because why? They're too small to share. They're basically, let me put it this way. The reason why the crack groups have a little bit more trouble than the pack groups is when everything is cracked up, the districts are divided smallly, very small, and then are so small that a share of the electric to be effective. In other words, getting back, cracking, what cracking does, again, it basically takes groups of disfavored voters among multiple districts, and when their electoral strength is divided, crack groups tend to struggle to elect their candidates that they prefer in any of the districts. Why? Because they are too small a share of the electorate to be effective. That's just cracking. Now, I did a video on this, a PowerPoint a long time ago, so some of this is a review. Now, packing is the opposite of cracking. So with packing, map drawers cram members of disfavored groups or parties into as few districts as possible. The pack groups are able to elect their preferred candidates by overwhelming margins, but their voting strength is weakened everywhere else. And this is what the Democrats are doing. In other words, they want to pack everybody into the urban areas, while the areas that some individuals are from currently are going to be weakened. Now, these techniques are not mutually exclusive. Both may be deployed by map drawers to engineer a decided partisan advantage. Now, again, don't judge a district by its shape. Well, we're going to get into that. I'm going to give you a lesson right now. While gerrymandering sometimes results in oddly shaped districts, that isn't always the case. See, a smart gerrymander can create cracked and packed districts that look neat and square, but nonetheless skew heavily in favor of one party. For instance, you can look at Illinois. That'll tell you something. Look at Maryland. Now, North Carolina's current congressional map is that case in point. Although the district lines might look normal, they sort voters with careful precision that Republicans are virtually assuring of winning 10 of the 14 congressional seats in that state. And sometimes they can win as many as 11. And, you might have a wildly skewed result or a perennial battleground state that regularly elects Democrats to statewide offices. So you have to look at how the maps are drawn. And the maps just don't affect everybody nationally. You also have to look at the local as well. And that's what people aren't looking at. And you have to know who you're voting for. You have to understand that when you have maps, particularly the conversely, the odd looking districts, they may be shaped so simply because they follow a geographic feature, such as a river or city boundaries, or because they keep together communities that have common identities or important shared representational needs. This is what I'm talking about, race baiting. Now, gerrymandering also impacts the balance of power. Again, current congressional maps show the power of gerrymandering. Now, after the 2020 census, Republicans controlled the redistricting process in more states than the Democrats and use this advantage aggressively. Now, by Brennan Center estimates, maps used in the 2024 election had an advantage of a net 16 fewer Democratic or Democratic leaning districts than maps that compiled with the strong anti-gerrymandering standards that stalled in the Freedom to Vote Act. Now, maps in Texas and Florida are especially skewed, but North Carolina provides one of the most striking examples of the power of gerrymandering to affect the balance of power, not only in a state, but nationally. So after the North Carolina Supreme Court struck down the state's 2021 congressional map as an impersonable partisan gerrymander, under the state constitution, the court put in place a map drawn by court appointed experts. So By utilizing the map in the 2022 midterms, the state sent an even number of Democrats and Republicans to the U.S. House, a result in keeping with the Tar Heels battleground politics. In other words, it was balanced. But now, see, here's the thing. You can gerrymander the districts, and the Democrats can put the right people. You don't have to put a bunch of far leftists in power. And the Republicans don't have to put a bunch of far righties in power. Now, you have to look at it. There are changes to the composition of the state Supreme Court. Now, the court reversed its recent ruling and said that it would no longer police partisan gerrymandering. So that means free to gerrymandering. The Republican controlled legislature withdrew the map, and after the 2024 election, North Carolina saw 3 Democratic districts flip to Republicans, enough to give control of the U.S. House to the GOP by a slim margin. Another Democratic district narrowly avoided flipping. So, to be sure, the Democrats, they're not alone in gerrymandering. The Democrats started it. So this article is basically focused on the Republicans, but the Democrats in Illinois, for example, boldly redrew their state's congressional map to reduce Republicans to holding just 3 of 17 seats, the fewest number of Republican seats since the Civil War by contrast. So the Brennan Center estimates that a fair Illinois map would have around 6 GOP seats. Well, you look at Virginia, they actually had 10 Democratic seats to 1 Republican seat. Now, the gerrymandering does get worse. Again, gerrymandering is not new. Even the founding generation, for all of its lofty democratic ideals, was not above putting a thumb on the scale. Elbridge Gerry. If you don't know who Elbridge Gerry was, Elbridge Gerry, I believe, was a governor of Massachusetts. Elbridge Gerry is where gerrymandering came from. Again, Elbridge Gerry, from whom the practice of gerrymandering is named, was both the signer of the Declaration of Independence and a member of the Constitutional Convention, and in designing Virginia's very first congressional map. So Patrick Henry famously attempted to draw district boundaries that would block his rival, James Madison, from a winning seat. Now we're going all the way back to the 18th century. However, while gerrymandering dates back to the earliest days of the nation, it has also changed dramatically since its founding. So today, intricate computer algorithms and detailed data about voters' political preferences and behavior allow map drawers to basically draw districts with surgical precision. So where people who gerrymander once had to pick from a few maps drawn by hand, they can now create and pick from thousands of computer generated options. And now you have AI as well, not just computer generated options. Now, add to the harsh reality, map drawers in most of this country no longer have to fear judicial intervention. Why? Because in the 2019 case, Rucho versus Common Cause, the Supreme Court held that gerrymandering was inconsistent with democratic principles. Gerrymandering claims were a political question beyond the reach of federal courts to address. So this basically follows an earlier Supreme Court case, Lulick versus Perry, which greenlighted the practice of mid-decade redistricting for partisan purposes. Now, what do they mean by mid-decade gerrymandering? You see, 2020 was the last census. So 2025 is the mid-decade of the 2020s. So the next census comes out in 4 years in 2030. Now, what you need to know is gerrymandering affects all Americans, but some of its most significant costs are born of communities of color. Now, Targeting the political power of minority communities is often a key element of partisan gerrymandering. This is why you don't gerrymander by race. And this is especially the case in the South, where white Democrats are a comparatively small part of the electorate and often live automatically from the standpoint of gerrymander mining map drawer in the same neighborhoods and communities as white Republicans. So even with computer assisted slicing and dicing, it can be hard to put together a map that has the desired partisan effect simply by targeting white voters. So, but in contrast, continued residential segregation and racially polarized voting patterns, especially in southern states, mean that cracking and packing communities of color can be an efficient, if cynical, tool for creating advantages for the party in control of the map drawing pen. This is true regardless of whether it is Democrats or Republicans drawing the map. Now, here again, the Supreme Court has made things worse. The Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. This is what you all need to understand right now. Because, see, a lot of black people are doing this. They're talking about the Voter Rights Act. Well, and this is the key, because the Constitution and the Voter Rights Act prohibit racial discrimination in redistricting. So you can discriminate against whites. This is why the blacks are mad, because they think they're going to be discriminated against when it is not true. But because there often is a correlation between party preference and race, especially in the South, the court's ruling in Rucho opened a door for states to simply defend racially discriminatory maps on the grounds that were lawfully discriminating against Democrats rather than impersonally discriminating against Black, Latino, and Asian voters. Well, you have maps drawn. You see that map in Louisiana? Now, again, South Carolina offers a vivid example of this dynamic. After the 2020 census, state legislatures, they withdrew the coastal district of Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace to remove large numbers of Charleston area black voters. When black voters challenged the reconfigured district in federal court as an unconstitutional racial gerrymander, lawmakers defended the map based on politics, namely the desire to make Mace's highly competitive district merely more Republican. So targeting black voters and their political power was just a means to an end. The Supreme Court agreed that, finding that black voters had proven that the map's lines were based on race and not party affiliation. Well, you can have representation. Blacks have a lot of representation in all of the cities. Now, South Carolina is far from alone. In states and localities around the country, naked partisanship is increasingly being used as an excuse for maps that dilute the voting power of the nation's fast growing communities of color. Now, here's what's happening. It's supposed to be we the people, but the politicians are using the people for themselves, but the politicians aren't representing the people. Now, Congress can outlaw partisan gerrymandering, even though the Supreme Court has been willing to constrain these anti-democratic abuses. Congress still can. Now, first of all, too, you have to understand that we are not a democracy. We are a republic. I hear the Democrats talking about democracy, democracy, democracy. We've never been a democracy. But what I'm doing is giving you an insight on gerrymandering, and I'm going to go back and tell you why gerrymandering is illegal by race. Now, in 2022, the House passed the Freedom to Vote Act. It's a landmark piece of federal democracy reform legislation that would prohibit mid-decade redistricting and ban partisan gerrymandering and congressional map drawing. It would have improved legal protections of voters of color in redistricting and required greater transparency in the map drawing process and improved voters' ability to challenge gerrymandered maps in court and win timely relief. However, while the bill had enough votes to pass in the Senate, it failed because the body fell short by 2 votes of changing filibuster rules to allow a floor vote. Now, the split along party lines with every Democrat in support and every Republican opposing, but with the Supreme Court having enabled a new round of aggressive mid-decade gerrymandering, both parties seem eager to join in. That could change in time, with both Republicans and Democrats coming to see the benefits of having uniform standards and a level playing field. So fair representation for all Americans depends on it. Now, the Democrats have been using gerrymandering longer than anybody. Now, again, gerrymandering by race is unconstitutional and it is not permitted. While not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, the Supreme Court has ruled that redistricting based primarily on race violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and the 15th Amendment. And it is also prohibited by the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So while you have the Stacey Abrams out there screaming that, oh, they're eliminating the Voter Rights Act. No, they're not. It's that gerrymandering by race, thinking that you're going to get black representation, violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and the 15th Amendment. And by the VRA of 1965, and I'm talking about the Voter Rights Act, you cannot draw maps based on race. Now, here are the key details. The 14th Amendment forbids using race as the predominant factor in drawing district lines as established in cases like Shaw versus Reno. The 15th Amendment prohibits drawing districts to dilute or deny minority voting power. Now you have racism and partisan. Now the Supreme Court distinguishes between illegal racial gerrymandering, and that's basically gerrymandering based on race, and legal partisan gerrymandering based on political party affiliation. Now here's the problem. The two, they often overlap. And now, here in 2026, the Supreme Court continues to refine the framework for assessing when gerrymandering or redistricting laws constitute illegal racial gerrymandering. Recently, addressing this in Louisiana versus Callias. Now, while partisan gerrymandering is generally permitted, using race as a primary factor to separate voters is unconstitutional. Now, the Supreme Court believes that the Democrats are using race in Louisiana. Now, for Virginia, that seems to be more of a partisan effort to keep Republicans from having any representation. Now, again, so we'll get it clear if it comes up. There are different sections. So the 14th Amendment, and this is racial vote dilution and racial gerrymandering. You need to look at the 14th Amendment, Section 1. Now, again, much of the Supreme Court's redistricting jurisprudence has been prompted by disputes concerning the interplay between the requirements of the Voter Rights Act and the constitutional standards of equal protection. That is, under certain circumstances, the VRA may require the creation of one or more majority minority districts and a congressional redistricting plan in order to prevent the denial or abridgment of the right to vote based on race, color, or membership in a language minority. So a majority minority district is one in which a racial or language minority group comprises a voting majority. So the creation of such districts can avoid majority vote dilution by helping to ensure that racial language minority groups are not submerged into the majority and therefore denied an equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. Now, you have to go through all of this. Now, there's a clause. Now, right now, it's up in the Supreme Court. Now, this is the 14th Amendment, Section 1. And what I've done, I've explained gerrymandering to you. Now, for the most part, a lot of blacks, they have what they call a majority minority. So they're putting all the minorities in a group, particularly all the blacks in Louisiana, 350 to 400 mile stretch. But that also dilutes some of the areas that are white areas. So the persons that are Caucasian, they might not even be able to vote for the candidate that they wish to vote for. So that diluted some of the rural areas. And that's what the Virginia legislation did too. So you're down there in Emporia, Virginia, and your district is in Alexandria, Virginia. Well, you're never going to get the candidate that you want because the lifestyles in Alexandria, Virginia are much different than they are in Emporia, Virginia. I know I've been to Emporia, Virginia. That's more or less the country, the southern part of Virginia. They don't reflect. It's just like Louisiana. Now, again, the Democrats are upset because they have been beaten at their own game. And again, in Virginia, there was language that was put into the vote that people didn't know about. And the funny thing about it is, even with that vote, the Democrats only won it by a slim margin, 2.9%. So all I can tell you right now, Republicans, if you want to stop some of this, you got to get out there to vote. Because you can gerrymander all the maps you want. You're sitting home while the Democrats are voting. Guess what? What you didn't want is going to come back into play again. Trump's going to get impeached. I mean, it's going to be nonstop hearings. The Democrats, they may bankrupt this country. And if you're black, I'm just telling you black something. The Democrats aren't doing anything for you. See, the Republicans don't care about you, but the Democrats aren't doing anything for you. But in the end, I'll tell you what, I like to see if most blacks vote Republican, what would happen to the Democrats? Because see, the Democrats leaned on black voters for a long time, but you screwed black voters over. And in the end, lost a lot of those black voters. So now you're trying to reset yourself by giving illegals everything. But these illegals are living off of the civil rights movement. In fact, all the movements, the LGBTQ movement, the feminist movement, although you had feminism back in the 18th centuries or the 19th and 20th centuries, but it's gone full blown now. But the bottom line is this: you cannot have districts based on race. And for black people, let me tell you something. Most of you who are in the urban areas, you're going to vote for your black politician to represent you. In fact, that black politician, you vote on symbolism because that black politician is not representing you. Because if they were representing you, you wouldn't be in hoods now. You wouldn't be on welfare. They're making money off of you. These race hustlers come in. If something happens, like your Al Sharptons, talk about millionaires, your Boule niggas, these guys come in, these pastors, they make money off of your stupidity. And they tell you how bad the Republicans are. When really, these coon ass Negroes, they love white supremacy because white supremacy gives them power over you, but you're too dumb to see it. And in the end, what's going to happen, you're always going to be left in the hood. They want you to be in poverty because they want to have corruption. They want to bankrupt you while they get rich. Yeah. Just because they look like you doesn't mean they want to be like you. See, everybody wants to be a Negro, but don't want to be a Negro. They like to take bits and pieces. But in the long run, all I can tell you right now is the Democrats started the gerrymandering. The Democrats are the party of the Klan. The Democrats talk all this bullshit about billionaires, and they got enough billionaires. Bezos, he's a Democrat. Bill Gates, he's a Democrat. Billionaires. But see, the Democrats don't talk about their billionaires. They talk about the billionaires on the right. But if you look at the Republican Party, Democrats have more of the billionaires. In fact, all the protests are funded by George Soros, the No Kings protest. Then you had this, what is this May Day parade or May Day over the economy? Teachers letting their children out of school so they can go protest in Chicago. I remember when I moved here in 2015 in Indiana, a number of women walked out of work in Chicago because of equal pay. You know, it was funny because a lot of the men didn't care. They got more work done. In fact, the workday kept going. You didn't hear too much about it. Why? Because it kept on going. We didn't need the women in there. But with this May Day, May 1st, which was on a Friday, so you have teachers. And education is very bad. Education is very corrupt, very corrupted. Education is part of that five powers of society that I tell you about. If you don't know what they are, education is one, religion, media, and that media includes social media. Then you have government and jobs. Why do I say jobs? Because jobs pay for all these DEI programs, all these sexual harassment programs. Sexual harassment programs are good, but DEI programs aren't, because DEI, in my humble opinion, is really another name for affirmative action. But see, again, most black people, particularly black men, do not benefit from affirmative action or DEI. Black women do. And this is why everything is created for women. That's why women will tell you they're balling out of control. Most women are communists and socialists. They vote for government because they don't have to work to make anything equal. That's why a lot of women are running for office. So they have the power to make themselves even more and more lazy because they really don't want to work. They want to act like they're working. Now, of course, that's not all women, but it's enough of them. But then you have a number of men. And you're left in this country. They want to give away the country to the wrong people. You let your Somalis come in, do what they want. You let other people of color come in, but you shit on your own people. And if you look at everything, the real treasonous in this country, the real clan in this country, and the real races in this country still in existence today. And that is the Democratic Party. They were known as the Dixiecrats in the South, but they haven't disappeared. They just brought in stupid black people and other minorities and feminists. But the Democratic Party still run by the Dixiecrats. All the minorities are just puppets. So if you think the Ku Klux Klan has disappeared, they might not have masks on, but you can hear it in their rhetoric. Because in the end, Democrats still party of the racists. They're the party of identity politics. They are the party that will continue to separate this country because they have nothing on their plate to give the American people. Because the American people are in their way of a new voting bloc. And that voting bloc is illegal immigrants. The Democratic Party is they're against law and order. They're against capitalism. They're against masculine men. They're against marriage. They're against heterosexual families. They're against everything that is crucial to this country, like Christianity. But they believe in deviance. But if you think about it, the Democratic Party has always been a party of deviance. They've always been a party of cheating. Because in the end, I said, the Ku Klux Klan is still in your face. Too many black people are too blind to see it. That's why they're on a plantation. In fact, the funny thing about the plantation, some of your worst overseers were the black overseers. And some of the people who sold you into slavery were people who look like you, black people, were your Boule Africans. But too many of you don't want to believe it. But it's true. But when you don't do your research, you become very gullible. And see what the Democrats do? They get you into frenzies. They get you to react emotionally. They get you to think very, very stupidly. I should say they don't get you to think. And it's the way they want you to think. So in reality, real party of racism that these black people are talking about all this gerrymandering, war, it's the war that they started. But the bottom line is they don't want anybody else doing what they do. They do as I say, not as I do. It's called hypocrisy. The Democrats have been exposed. They don't have anything. What they want to do is keep you down. If you're black, want to keep you on a plantation. Why? Because massa is your gatekeeper. But he's putting that gatekeeping through the Boule Negroes, like your Stacey Abrams, your Al Sharptons, all those blacks who come on MSNBC, your E.L. Hewleys, your Steve Harveys, your Ricky Smileys, your Magic Johnsons, all of them, your Barack Obamas. And they want to keep you in poverty, yet you keep voting for them. So if you want to know where real racism is, look at the Democratic Party. Those individuals want to keep overseeing you in poverty and in slavery. And in the end, you will never be free. But if you open your mind, see the truth for what it is, you will get off the plantation, be a free thinker. See what I want? I want individuals who are free thinkers with like minds. See, the Democrats are crazy because they really have no policies. They believe in communism. You know, every time I hear fascism, they're your fascists. They're your socialists. They're your communists. They're your authoritarians. They blame the other side, but they're the ones who are doing it. It's just that the other side is too stupid to see it because they're scared. So I will say this to everybody on the right, Republicans: vote, vote, vote. Because if they win, cancel culture comes right back. And they're already treasonous. They will put Republicans in jail. They will pack the Supreme Court. They want to pack the Supreme Court. But bottom line, they never play by the rules. Why? Because they will lose if they play by the rules. And in the end, truth sets you free. But again, the real racists are the ones who are the donkeys. And they started in the South. And that is the Democratic Party. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 401 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're looking for some STEM content, check out my STEM channel known as the QCIS channel. On that channel, I give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, here's where you can find me. For the 401 Talk Zone radio show, you can find me right here on YouTube. You can find me right here on X, formerly Twitter. Also find me on Rumble and True Social. And for the QCIS channel, you can find me right here on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn. And for you individuals who were offended and jealous, you don't have to be. I'm just giving you information, education, which produces knowledge. I want you to understand this. Always be blessed for what you have. Worry about what you don't have. Know that the sun always rises in the east and sets in the west. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. But if the shoe fits, wear it. And if you don't like the shoe, just change it. Once again, thank you for listening to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful, gracious evening. God bless you. I'm out.